Facebook Live or our YouTube page, The Paul Harrell Program. This is the set where we shoot our Wednesday weekly videos for our Patreon subscribers. And if you want to get on board and get extra Paul Harrell Program content because you want to partner with us, you believe the show has value, you want to help us keep the show on the air, you want to help us grow the show, you want to help us make videos like this one even better, then you need to seriously think about subscribing to Patreon. It's patreon.com/thephp. That's patreon.com/thephp. Get extra content today, partner with us, and help build the Liberty Machine. We're asking you to partner with us for as little as $5 a month. Now, you can go up from there. You can go to $10 a month and get extra features, or $25 a month and become a Conduit Media Insider. But for $5 a month, you can really help us out. You can get extra content. You can see what we talk about on sets like this, and I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching. Back in a moment.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
The program, thank you so much. This is hour number 2. My name is Paul. You've found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We are building a Liberty Machine here. For those of you watching on Facebook Live and over at paulharrell.com, we got kind of a 3-person split screen in here. I want to welcome back to the studio. We have Secretary of State Mark Martin is with us. Mark, thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you for having me on again.
Absolutely. And we have Pastor Iverson Jackson is with us, who's going to be at the Arkansas State University Student Union giving the keynote speech for the Arkansas State Young Republicans. Iverson, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Paul.
Really glad that you could be here. Let's start with you.
Okay.
The speech here, this is 7:30 tonight, and Arkansas State University Young Republicans, as well as State Representative Dan Sullivan, bringing you in. And the topic is One Nation Under God. Tell us a little bit about that.
One Nation Under God, that's that part, One Nation Under God, you know, that's what we are. That's what our founders envisioned when you look at the Declaration of Independence, when they talk about we owe these truths to be self-evident, that, you know, that we are endowed by our Creator. So they acknowledge that we are a creator. And then they go on to tell us that our Creator gives us certain inalienable and unalienable rights, you know, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Among, you know, them, we have many more than that, but those are the ones that they named. And so those only come when you're one nation under God. You look at any nation that disavows God, they don't have the liberty that we have, and that's why we have the illegal immigration problem that we have. People are not fighting to get out of America. They're fighting to get in America because this is where freedom lives.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. And there actually is, a lot of people don't realize this in today's day and age, but, you know, the idea of founding a country, recognizing the existence of a higher power.
Right.
You know, you look at totalitarian states, and they are the higher power. They don't recognize that. So it's kind of about establishing the country in humility.
Absolutely.
Versus, you know, saying we have it all figured out. So there's a theology there about the Creator.
Right. This is what guided our founders. And I know you'll have people say, well, you had founders that didn't even believe in God, or, you know, they were deists and so forth and so on. That does not mean that they did not understand and agree with the principles of liberty that are found in the Holy Scriptures. And that's where people are missing it. They're missing, like, for instance, with Thomas Jefferson. When you look at his monument in Washington, D.C., I've been there many, many times, and you'll see statements that he made about God, and you would think this man is a Pentecostal. And here people are saying that he wasn't, you know, that he didn't believe in God. Well, that's about as far from the truth as you can get. He read his Bible, he knew what the Bible says, and he understood that these liberties that we enjoy today, the few that are left, only come from God and not from man. And if something comes from God, then no man can take it away from you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I want to turn now to Secretary of State Mark Martin. So, Mark, what brings you here to this neck of the woods for this event tonight?
I was just invited up by my friend Dan Sullivan, and I figured I'd come up and show some support for him.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, one nation under God, that's something that I think a lot of people here in Arkansas, I mean, it really resonates with. Yes. And you see what the state of the country is now, and there's no question that you know, we're kind of experiencing what looks like to be a slow moral decay. Talk about that a little bit.
Well,
or your thoughts on that?
You know, one of the things that I would actually start with is whether or not we recognize it, or any country recognizes it or not. we're under God. We're either under God's judgment or we're under His blessing, whether or not we want to recognize His sovereignty in the matter or not. That's really the starting point. I'm reminded of a quote by Abraham Kuyper I'd like to read to you. He says, "There's not 1 square inch of the whole domain of human existence over which Christ, who is sovereign over all, does not cry, mine." What's he talking about whenever he's developing these ideas? Well, the overall idea that is going on here is everything that's going on is under God's authority. How does He then delegate His authority in the world? And God first delegates who has more authority over you than anyone else. Ultimately, everybody would say God. But then, you move away from God, and then you're talking about the authority that an individual has over his own self-discipline. Now, Kuyper looked at things.
The maintenance of a free society is a very difficult and complicated thing. And it requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind. It requires a willingness to put up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you will spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. We lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program today. Thank you so much for being with us and listening. My name is Paul. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are working and building a liberty machine. One of the ways you can help us build it is to call us, text us, let us know what you think. That number, 870-275-9799. And this segment and portion of the Paul Harrell program, just so you know, is brought to you by the great folks at Conduit for Commerce. Because they're putting Arkansas small business first. And joining us now to talk a little bit more about that, we have Brenda Vassar-Taylor with us from Conduit for Commerce. Brenda, welcome back.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for mentioning our article from this week that came out, Conduit for Commerce, Tax Reform and Relief Task Force Recommendation.
Yeah, and that's what's so interesting. When we went over this on the program a couple of days ago, there obviously is a task task force. Sorry, I've had so many different nicknames for it at this point that I'm messing up myself. But and Conduit for Commerce has put out recommendations, and very serious, specific recommendations for tax reform and relief. And we did go over it. And Brenda, I got to say, one of the things that stood out to me is something that I haven't heard anybody else say, and that's that our tax system is really the issue that drives government spending. You write here in the paper, the level of government spending in Arkansas is directly determined by the tax system, not the budget process. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, that's exactly right, Paul. But first, I want to, again, thank you for having us on. Conduit for Commerce is focused on small business in Arkansas. But let me tell you why we feel like, we qualify as a voice here.
Okay.
I am, let me give you a little bit of background about what I do. I have an accounting degree. I have a law degree. I have a master's in tax law. And I have practiced tax law for over 30 years, and these are the kinds of things I deal with daily. And so I can recall as a young law student and then getting out, practicing law with fresh eyes, I looked at the laws that other states had, and I thought, well, why can't Arkansas do something like that? Back then, Delaware and their corporate system, everyone wanted to set up a corporation in Delaware. And as I learned, well, it's just a matter of changing the laws. So couldn't Arkansas do that? And so I applaud the opportunity that we now have and that the legislators now have to change Arkansas's tax code so that we too can become a dynamic state and engage through changing our laws to free commerce in Arkansas rather than restrain it or control it. And so as we look at ways to do that, and as I, tried to go look a little closer and a little deeper, we've heard our governor say we have a revenue problem. And as I look at it, I think, well, I guess he's right, because the revenue, the money that we have to spend in Arkansas, is directly tied to our tax structure, our taxing system. Everything that comes in the door through taxes or regulation fees, whatever, is everything that's spent. But everything that does come in is spent. And so we spend all that we rake in, and there's not any mechanism that we have to reduce that. And so what you hear now, well, we have a revenue problem, implying we need more revenue. And then you have people say, no, we have a spending problem. Well, we're spending everything we bring in under the current system in Arkansas, that Revenue Stabilization Act that we love so much because it, quote, requires us to spend no more every year than we take in. Therefore, we call it our balanced budget. But at the same time, our system itself is what's driving more and more spending. As more comes in, we spend more. And it's like not having a limit on your gas pedal,
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking with Brenda Vassar-Taylor from Conduit for Commerce. You're exactly right, Brenda. And in this, again, the quote from that I just read, the level of government spending in Arkansas is directly determined by the tax system, not the budget process. So that would suggest that if they reduce our taxes, meaning the government gets less money, that would be a positive thing. But let me ask you this, Brenda. Will you define what a tax cut is, in your opinion?
A tax cut, and I believe anyone who is listening, just the common voter, when they think of tax cut, they think they're going to send less money. They personally will send less money, but they don't think just about themselves getting a tax cut. They assume the entire system is reduced, meaning that Arkansas would basically receive less money than it did the prior year. This tax neutral and shifting taxes, the rules under which this task force is assigned, they are promising to modernize and simplify the code, be competitive and attract businesses, create jobs, be fair to individuals and entities. And so that fairness thing, when you start moving it around and saying, we're going to get rid of exemptions, that sounds really good. These people who are getting to be exempt under paying taxes, well, that goes to the fairness piece. But when you're getting rid of exemptions, you're raising taxes, the revenue that comes into the state, and people are paying more. But if you're going to reform it so that we have actually attracted business, we have to start out, before we eliminate an exemption, we have to significantly cut rates. And that's the thing I have not heard this task force say. I've heard them say we're going to broaden the tax base, meaning more people will pay taxes. We're going to, in other words, increase the number of people who pay. We're going to get rid of the deductions that some people have. But I have yet to hear them say they're going to cut the rates. I've heard them say, if we can get the internet sales tax and it brings in enough money, as soon as we know how much it brings in, then maybe we can talk about cutting rates. That's not what Arkansas needs, because that will produce more revenue for the state of Arkansas, and that is a tax increase.
And
so you measure tax cuts by how much revenue the state gets.
Exactly, and because of the Revenue Stabilization Act, we're at a point to where if the government gets more money, it will get spent. I mean, you hear at Conduit for Commerce the tax recommendations. You guys are really articulating what the actual problem is, and when you mention that you haven't heard them talk about significantly cutting the rates, I do believe. I mean, we've documented why here on the program. It's because, Speaker of the House Jeremy Gillum, when he, kicked off the very first meeting. He, corrected a perception, or at least his perception in the media, that this task force was there just to recommend future tax cuts to the General Assembly. And he said that that's not necessarily the case. And so, we have heard these buzzwords like broadening the base, eliminate exemptions. It seems to me and this is what I'm worried about, that we're going to have a tax increase, meaning more money coming from the people to the government, and then they're going to say, and we'll lower your taxes later, or we'll pass a bill next time that'll lower your taxes this amount, 2 years from now, and then more the next year. It'll be like a phase-in process. And if they do that, they're ignoring the problem that you guys are articulating here, which is the money that comes in, they immediately spend.
That's right. If you want smaller government, if you want to cut spending, we have to cut the taxes defined by the government gets less money than it did the year before. And let me tell you something else that I want our listeners to be listening for is, don't fall for the progressives' tendency to use the class warfare card. We hear about the race card, but class warfare card. No one wants to talk about corporate tax cuts. You've heard Donald Trump talk about them, and I applaud him because I know one of the bullet points on the assignment of the task force is to create jobs. Government does not create jobs. Government can free enterprise to create jobs. It can restrict enterprise from creating jobs. But if we're going to look at what we've already assigned government to do, we've assigned them to educate. Public schools should be educating the future workforce. They can educate the workforce. They can provide workers, educated workers. They're not doing that. Do that job first. Do that job, period. Leave companies alone. And I would say that if I could educate the audience on one thing, I would want to teach them that corporations do not pay taxes. Large companies do not pay taxes. Now, the small mom and pop that happen to have a corporation, C corporation, they're going to pay tax and they're going to feel it, but they're going to adjust we're going to go out of business because we're not making a profit. But big companies that stay in business pass on those taxes. And I would ask your listeners to just look at your current mail and see that the Arkansas Blue Cross Blue Shield raised the premiums 19.3% with the permission of our Arkansas Insurance Commissioner. And that 19.3% includes the 2.5% tax that's going to go to the state of Arkansas. So the state of Arkansas got a 19.3% raise in premiums that they're going to get from Blue Cross Blue Shield. But Blue Cross Blue Shield's not paying those taxes. They're passing it on to those who are paying it. Now, then I have to do a little plug for what's really happening with our Medicaid expansion. The federal government is paying those premiums. Well, the federal government doesn't get that money out of thin air. They take that out of our left pocket. If we want to say Arkansas taxes come out of our right pocket. So the taxpayer is paying these taxes. Corporations do not pay taxes. So do not be afraid for Arkansas, because I have put a bold recommendation. If Arkansas really wanted to become a dynamic, business-friendly environment, they would eliminate corporate income tax. And if you look at the system currently, Arkansas is not receiving a lot of money, a lot of its general revenue from corporations. If you offset what they receive by what they're giving away, the companies they want to give it to, picking from those who are strong enough to pay taxes.
Talking about corporate welfare.
Winners and losers.
You're talking about corporate welfare, yeah.
You get rid of all of that, yeah, and then it would probably be close to a revenue-neutral tax elimination. And talk about fair, we could really wave the flag, because that's fairness to entities and to the individual.
And such an immediate effect. And it is a bold policy suggestion, recommendation, eliminate Arkansas's corporate tax altogether. So if you put a freeze on the current status quo, the current version of what they consider economic development, which you've already alluded to, taking taxpayer dollars, giving it to private corporations, to build a factory or revitalize a factory, and in the next 2 or 3 years they're going to create 30 jobs here or 100 jobs there. Can you imagine if they just in a blanket policy shift said no more corporate tax in Arkansas? Now every existing Arkansas corporation, every one of them, now has all of this extra, income, and you have the ability to see an economic impact immediately, not 2-3 years. Let's cross our hearts and hopefully the government will have gambled correctly and we'll actually see some sort of improvement in our economy from their investment.
Well, let listeners just think about this for a while. Rather than falling for the class warfare card and thinking those big companies need to pay. I mean, think about the fact that I told you that I'm a tax attorney. I get paid by people to help them pay less tax, pay everything that they owe to the government, but to pay no more. Now, don't you think I would be interested in a company asking me how to pay less tax? That I might say, first, you need to move to a state that doesn't charge taxes to a corporation. And as mobile as these companies are, why would they move to Arkansas? We've heard Representative Charlene Fight argue that we need to make Arkansas friendly to those 1,300 military retirees who can move here and live here and pay no taxes. 1,300 people are going to help our economy. If Arkansas legislators seriously want to make Arkansas stand out and be a commerce magnet, something that they're really not benefiting from currently, they would get rid of the corporate income tax, and they would see corporate America flock to Arkansas like it's never done before.
Yeah, you are exactly right. I mean, this paper is really, really good. And, here's another quote from it. Therefore, if you want spending reduced in Arkansas, if you want smaller government, you simply cut taxes. And then in the middle of the paper and the end of the paper, and I'll give you the last word, Brenda Vassar-Taylor from Conduit for Commerce, you say that it is merely a question of this, quote, how much do the people of Arkansas want to pay for government? Because you clearly establish here, Brenda, that they spend every dime we're giving them is going right back out on some priority.
Well, that's right. To say that we want smaller government, cut spending, we're going to cut spending, we're going to do a budget plan, that's ridiculous. All we need to talk about is how much are we going to cut taxes, because under Arkansas' system now, everything that comes in is spent.
That's exactly right.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. Brenda Vassar-Taylor, Conduit for Commerce. Check it out, folks. Conduitforcommerce.org. You can check out the recommendations to the task force. I certainly hope. I know they're meeting next week, and I hope they take these recommendations seriously. Brenda, it's always great to have you on the program.
Thank you very much, Paul.
All righty. Folks, we're going to take a break. The phone number, call us, text is 870-275-9799. Coming up in the next long segment, we're going to finally recap, do a, circa 2015 Religious Freedom Restoration Act and the entire chaotic cave that the governor participated in. I'm going to, if you don't know what happened in 2015 to your religious freedom, you've got to stay tuned, okay? Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment.
If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The Zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the Zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. first slavery and now fat shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Oh, you know what? Okay, fine. Whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP Parody. Need to get something off your chest? Then call or text Paul now, 870-275-9799.
All right, welcome back. Sorry, again, getting some things organized here. It has been an absolute, I don't know, you kind of get outraged when you go back all the way to 2015, to April of 2015, and you start to review what exactly happened with Governor Asa Hutchinson and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and the explanations we were given at the time that didn't make sense then, they still don't make sense now. In the political gamesmanship, that if you dive into the headlines and you put some pieces together, things become very clear that you know, the swamp in Little Rock killed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Now, there was a version that eventually did pass, but it was one that passed Walmart's. That Walmart's approval was given for the one that actually passed. We've got to walk you through it. And the reason we've got to walk you through this is because this program has new listeners. We've been getting a ton of new listeners. Matter of fact, I would love, you know, for somebody to give me, 17 points. The governor's approval rating since April has tanked 17 points among Republicans, and our numbers since April have steadily risen. So I don't know. There's probably some correlation, X amount of listeners. Eventually you get to 1 percentage point decline among Republicans. I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of algebra equation that we could do to figure that out. I don't know. You tell me. Now, and speaking, kind of keeping with our theme on taxes, we were just talking with Brenda Vassar-Taylor from Conduit for Commerce, and that was a great segment. Really good stuff. Check out that paper. But we do have Donald Trump and the House Republicans. They've released their plan at the national level. They've released their plan of what they think tax reform is going to look like. Now, and I will tell you this, the doubling of standard deductions from $12,000 to $24,000 is going to be really helpful to a lot of people, a lot of families out there. There's some more details about that whole business tax rate, no more than 25%. But when you get into the specifics, I'm kind of confused by it. But they still have kept this concept of, hey, if you have an LLC, your business isn't going to be taxed more than 25%. So that's going to be huge as well. And I'm also told that the big negotiations were whether or not they were going to allow the elimination of the state and local tax deduction. What I read this morning, at least, said they're going to go ahead and keep that deduction, which I'm sure is, I don't know. You could hear the sigh of relief from Governor Asa Hutchinson, because had they eliminated that, it would have all been on him, because we've wasted a ton of time not giving
Arkansas true tax relief over the last 3 years. Back in a moment.
Welcome those of you watching at paulharrell.com, Facebook Live, or our YouTube page, The Paul Harrell Program. This is the set where we shoot our Wednesday weekly videos for our Patreon subscribers. And if you want to get on board and get extra Paul Harrell Program content because you want to partner with us, you believe the show has value, you want to help us keep the show on the air, you want to help us grow the show, you want to help us make videos like this one even better, then you need to seriously think about subscribing to Patreon. It's patreon.com/thephp. That's patreon.com/thephp. Get extra content today, partner with us, and help build the Liberty Machine. We're asking you to partner with us for as little as $5 a month. Now, you can go up from there. You can go to $10 a month and get extra features, or $25 a month and become a Conduit Media Insider. But for $5 a month, you can really help us out. You can get extra content. You can see what we talk about on sets like this. And I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching. Back in a moment.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
From spheres going out from oneself, as you go farther and farther from oneself, your personal authority diminishes, and you get a situation where more and more things are delegated to God to take care of. You hear some of the Austrian economists call it the invisible hand. Some people call it providence or whatever. So when we begin to talk about ultimately where we're at, some things may come and go. We may not be one nation. We may not be a nation at all. But one thing that we will be is under God.
Yeah, that's very well said. You just think about where the state does come in. You talk about delegating authority. That's certainly a part of the whole situation. Right. You have Paul in the New Testament saying, "Hey, we hope that we are able under the state to go about the gospel in peace."
Right.
So there is certainly evidence out there of
absolutely
where it's easier. When you're freer, things are a lot easier. I mean, versus the totalitarian history that we have in the 20th century alone.
Well, and that's what's unique about this country is when we begin to look at the delegation of authority from that perspective, we see that it's centered on individuals. Every individual is endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. What we see here is a biblical pattern for government taking shape. Whether or not you believe in a creator or nature, I think it's evident in nature even that individual rights are what are supreme, because the individual is the one that's delegated the most authority to supervise himself. And of course, what's supervising ourselves? That's taking responsibility, right? So the pattern that the founders put together, whether or not they recognize it as a creator or as natural law, it's what's naturally the order of things, and self-government is the first order. And when you say the smallest form of self-government is individual.
That's correct.
So what you were pointing out there is a very, very deep theological concept.
Yeah. So we're talking with Secretary of State Mark Martin and Pastor Iverson Jackson. Iverson is going to be at Arkansas State University tonight with the ASU Young College Republicans, giving this talk about, one nation under God. It's very exciting. So tell us a little bit about, if you can, if you go all the way back to the founding and you go to what all of the sermons that were preached up and down the colonies, beforehand, it had a lot to do with what we're talking about, being an individual.
The Paul Harrell Program.
Really, we're knocking out two birds with one show here, and the reason is because I've had this list of things that have fallen through the cracks for a while, one of them being this segment that I can't wait to do on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act from 2015 and everything that happened. And also, Senator Scott Flippo back on October the 14th posted an amazing Facebook post. We're going to have him on at 5:30. To discuss that, because it was really, really high, big picture conservatism stuff, and that's, of course, what Senator Scott Flippo is best at. Really good stuff. Okay, the year was 2015.
And I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Joe in here. The year was 2015, and there was a bill called, I guess it was 1228, House Bill 1228. And this was the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Now, this shouldn't have been a big deal because, I'll be honest with you, the reason it shouldn't have been a big deal is because President Bill Clinton in like 1993 or 4 or something like that signed this exact same thing and talked about how the First Amendment's a big deal and protection of conscience is a big deal. It shouldn't have been an issue, right? It's basic. It's a, religious people have been a protected class in this country since its founding. It's very, very basic. Very, very basic. Yes, Joe.
Oh, man. I had it and I lost it.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Well, moving on. When you get it back, let me.
The year was 2015. Religious freedom was on the horizon. But wait, don't we already have religious freedom? It was on the horizon.
It was on the horizon. Yeah, it was within our grasp. All this was a clarification. Now, before we kind of look in Arkansas, you do have to know that there was already a big hubbub about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in Indiana. Yes, that's now Vice President Mike Pence. This was his state. He was governor at the time. And everybody was freaking out in businesses. It's very similar to what you saw in the North Carolina bathroom bill. The LGBT, RSTLNE, would you like to buy a vow community, they were against the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And so they started to protest in Indiana. And when the news media got word that there were legs to this story and the state of Arkansas was also doing a Religious Freedom Restoration Act, all of a sudden there was the LGBT protests here in Arkansas. And so I asked many of these LGBT individuals when I was down to the Capitol. They were protesting when everything got as heated as it did, and I started asking them about the First Amendment, religious protections, and things like that. And you would not believe how many people, first of all, they just don't believe you. They think you're using this phantom concept of religious conscience in order to discriminate against them, in order to hate them, or something like that legally. Okay? Now, in this current day, and we still have this, we have governments going after florists or bakers who don't want to be forced to participate in religious ceremonies that they believe, are religious in nature and violate their conscience. And so it really is, coming to a head here. And that's when, in 2015, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act made its way to Governor Asa Hutchinson's desk. And now there's a decision to be made. Let's go to the first article, Joe, shall we? This is the strangest headline that you'll see about this entire situation. It has to do with one of the governor's nephews. On April 3rd, 2015, the Huffington Post ran a story about Arkansas State Senator Jeremy Hutchinson, who called himself a coward because he was the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he voted for the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and was, you could say, a deciding vote to send it to Governor Asa Hutchinson's desk. This article is about how he regretted his vote and he called himself a coward. Now, if you'll dive a little bit deeper into this, on Facebook, Jeremy Hutchinson got a lot of flack for this, and he actually used the argument, and you'll have to go look this up separately, but Senator Jeremy Hutchinson used the argument that if Christians in America or in Arkansas do get persecuted for their religious beliefs, that it would actually be a good thing because the church, the early church grew as it was persecuted. Essentially, Senator Hutchinson was arguing from a situation of, yeah, we have religious freedom here in America, but we shouldn't fight to retain it as the culture shifts because it'll be good for the church in the long run. Now, while historically that may be accurate in terms of the church grew, the more bold people were, I don't want to be persecuted for my religious beliefs. Do you want your Do you want your friends to be persecuted for their religious beliefs? No, not me. Anyway, that was hit. I mean, this is the kind of ridiculous, mental gymnastics they have to do to avoid admitting that they're just doing the left's bidding here. Okay, or they're just very misguided in their whatever. So this story is very weird. You scroll down and you'll see, after HB 1222 of 2015 had been defeated 3 times in committee, a Democrat changed his vote and created a tie, which Hutchinson then had to break, he told the Huffington Post reporter. So he says that he was a coward. He said, quote, "I had to vote for it, period, because as chairman, you don't vote unless you needed to make the 5th vote, which is passing the vote. And so when this Democrat switched his vote, I was surprised, as was everybody else. And in that moment, I honestly was a coward and voted party line and voted to send it out." So Senator Jeremy Hutchinson here essentially admitting that he's a Democrat. This is why, by the way, if you fast forward to 2017, he stopped all of Linda Collins Smith's bills because he is a liberal and doesn't really believe. This is why he stopped any debate on a bathroom bill, any debate on any of that, because he doesn't want to be put in any kind of. And he's also shielding for Asa in 2017. Hang on. So, backing up to 2015, go to the next article, because this is where it's really interesting. A Democrat switched their vote, right? A Democrat switched their vote. Well, on April 16th, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette ran a piece authored by John Brummett entitled "This is Effective," April 16th, 2015. And in it, he's going over Asa, and he's essentially giving him praise without trying to give him praise, but you can tell John Brummett's pleased with everything. Compares Asa to Mike Beebe. Scrolling down, we eventually get to a part where it says this: "Finally, on the religious gay nonsense," John Brummett wrote, "Hutchinson said the oddest thing to reporters last week. You see, the offending bill, House Bill 1228 of 2015 again, was blissfully blocked in the Senate Judiciary Committee on a 4-4 vote. But Asa made a call to Senator David Burnett of Osceola to encourage him to do what he eventually did, which was flip his vote to get the bill out of the committee." We're putting the pieces together. Asa, according to John Brummett, personally lobbied a Democrat to switch his vote, and that's what moved the Religious Freedom Restoration Bill out of committee, then out of the Senate, then on to Governor Asa Hutchinson's desk. Okay? And then this happened. Arkansas Times, Benjamin Hardy, March 31st, 2015. Walmart CEO Doug McMillon calls for Governor Asa Hutchinson to veto HB 1228. Moving to the tweet. This is the statement. This is Walmart Newsroom. Go to the next slide there. Quote, go to the next tab. Quote, "Our statement on HB 1228. Quote, every day in our stores," Walmart said, "we see firsthand the benefits diversity and inclusion have on our associates, customers, and communities we serve. It all starts with our core basic belief of respect for the individual. Today's passage of HB 1228 threatens to undermine the spirit of inclusion present throughout the state of Arkansas and does not reflect the values we proudly uphold. For these reasons, we are asking Governor Asa Hutchinson to veto the legislation." All right? Now, let's leave this tweet up about Walmart. Let's go to the audio. Then on April 1st of 2015, the governor held a press conference, and it sounded like this.
As everyone knows, House Bill 1228 is now on my desk, and it's time for me to take a look at it and make some comments in reference to it. This is a bill that in ordinary times would not be controversial. But these are not ordinary times. This bill is not really complicated. The bill itself restates the standard of review for the courts to consider in determining First Amendment privileges as weighed against the compelling interest of the state. That's simply stated as a summary as to what this legislation does. It's a balancing test. The bill itself does not pick winners and losers. It balances two competing constitutional obligations that our founding fathers gave to us.
What competing?
But the issue has become
freedom?
Divisive because our nation remains split on how to balance the diversity of our culture with the traditions and firmly held religious convictions.
And you could have clarified what you could have.
It has divided families, and there is clearly a generational gap on this issue. My son Seth signed the petition asking me, Dad, the governor, to veto this bill. And he gave me permission to make that reference. And it shows that families, and there's a generational difference of opinion on these issues.
Stop. A generational difference of opinion that shows the moral decay of our country that will lead to ruin? Maybe. I don't know. Children leading their parents? I don't think that's a good idea. If I said something like that to my dad, he'd get a boat paddle out and he'd spank me. I'm saying, you know what I mean? He would run me out of town, vetoing a Religious Freedom Restoration Act. A generational gap. Well, why didn't the governor, seriously, why didn't the governor clarify that religious freedom is protected under the First Amendment and that this is not an issue? Because of that Walmart statement, that's why. Or maybe he doesn't. I mean, maybe he really believes it. I mean, we've got to balance. Things are different. We're having to balance between the times. And our culture is so diverse now and essentially yada, yada, yada. I mean, what he's essentially saying to me is there just may not be enough room for the First Amendment as we know it today. Certainly not as Bill Clinton and Al Gore when they signed this very document back in the 90s. Maybe there's just not. Maybe it's not time. So, go to the next cut, Joe, if you don't mind, whenever you're going. Again, this is more from that press conference back on April 2015.
Therefore, I ask that changes be made in the legislation. Mm-hmm. And I've asked that the leaders of the General Assembly to recall the bill so that it can be amended to reflect the terms of the Federal Religious Freedom and Restoration Act. In the alternative, it can be simply have some language changes so that those accommodations and changes can be made. So it can either be done by recalling the legislation or having additional legislation that would accomplish those changes. Again, this is difference between the executive branch, the legislative branch. We all have our responsibilities. We all have our different viewpoints. My responsibility is to speak out on my own convictions.
All right, stop. So then you can look at the headlines after this that report on this particular press conference. Asa now calls for changes. Now, first of all, think about this. Asa supported this bill. He got a Democrat, according to the media that I've shown you today, to switch his vote, and then Asa changes his mind, which just suggests that this whole process was devoid of actual understanding of first principles of our founding fathers, of the Constitution. And, you know, I don't know. You know, sometimes I get the feeling when Asa thinks that the Second Amendment's a privilege, doesn't say right. He talks about balancing First Amendment privileges here as well. I'm sure that's going to drive people. I mean, it's not called the Bill of Privileges. It's not called the Bill of Privileges. It's called the Bill of Rights. It's very frustrating. All right, last cut of that press conference on April Fool's Day, which I wish it really was an April Fool's joke, but it wasn't.
Environment. It is important to recognize that the bill, even as currently drafted, does not change who we are.
This is what made it so weird.
And it does not change the current protections against discrimination. This bill simply defines the standard to determine the right balance. But how do we as a state communicate to the world that we are respectful of the diverse workplace and we want to be known as a state that does not discriminate but understands tolerance?
Stop. The only risk that we had of becoming a state
that discriminates is the mainstream media and the LGBT, RSTLNE, would you like to buy a vowel community, misrepresenting what was at stake here. Instead, this was the opportunity for a true leader to combat the media here that would have turned on Asa, obviously, and to actually talk about the founding principles of this country. This was an opportunity for us to not just say, well, if the media reports it, it must be true, and instead combat what is not true. It's not true that this was about discrimination. It's not a true statement to say that this was for discrimination, unless you believe the First Amendment is about discrimination, which it's not. Now, somebody can feel discriminated against and not be discriminated against. But just because they feel discriminated, and I hurt for them. If you legitimately feel that you're discriminated against, but you're not actually discriminated, I'm sorry you feel that way. It must be devastating, okay? But just because we have half the country that's uneducated about what the Bill of Rights does say doesn't mean that, okay, well, because half the country feels that way, that you don't represent how a vast majority of Arkansans feel. And that's what Asa failed to do here, and it's important that you understand that. I lost it here. Back in April 1st on 2015, when he gave this press conference, I lost it because I had already been let down with Asa on the private option Arkansas Works Obamacare because he kept it. I think he betrayed the base. But you just assume, well, on social issues, though, we're still going to be united. You assume that. I assumed that. When I heard this, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. But that's what lets you know who really controls this state here, and it's not we the people. We saw this in 2015 when the SEC or the NCAA tried to, well, you can't have guns here. And what did they do? Oh, well, we got to fix it. It's like Arkansas and our elected officials, they listen more to Walmart and the SEC or the NCAA than they do to we, the people. It's just really frustrating. And I wanted to do this whole segment to recap it because you got to know. So what did they do? Well, the legislature, the lapdog legislature, they didn't want to buck Asa. And, in their defense, the honeymoon was still in full swing, right? There weren't near the amount of people willing to say Asa Hutchinson is a progressive liberal who are Republicans than there are today. Now, that's in large thanks to this program and what we're doing, but I just would say the honeymoon was still in full swing, so what did the lapdog legislature do? They said, okay, now there was one that didn't go along with it. In order to do this, go to this next slide, Joe. It's the Arkansas Times piece. Skip the one that you have and go to the next one. So the title of this one, Arkansas Times, was... this was, again, April 1st. So they did this right after the press conference on April 1st. They hijacked Senator Gary Stubblefield's bill. This is very rarely reported, and you have to read between the lines here. But HB 1228 fix approved by the Senate. Again, Lindsey Miller, Benjamin Hardy, and Leslie Newell Peacock reported this on April the 1st, the Arkansas Times. Listen to this in this paragraph. Senator Jeremy Hutchinson, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee and nephew of the governor, said that, see, I'm not the only one, by the way, that points out that Asa and Jeremy are related I'm sorry, that Jim and Jeremy are related to Asa. I'm not the only one that points that out. Everybody points that out. Two pieces of legislation, SB 229 and SB 975 were the bills with titles that most corresponded with the intent of HB 1228, according to the Capitol attorneys. Senator John Cooper, the primary sponsor of SB 229, was amendable to an amendment to replace the original text. Of course he was, again, Benedict Arnold, which was initially intended to protect Arkansas from Sharia law. According to Senator Jim Hendren and Senator Hutchinson, however, Senator Gary Stubblefield, the sponsor of SB 975, was noncommittal and unreasonable. You know why? Because Senator Stubblefield, and I'm putting words in his mouth, I don't know this, but I would suspect that Senator Gary Stubblefield would say, you've caved on the religious freedom bill that you supported until Walmart called, and now you want my bill? That is not even there for, and the thing is, they were past the filing deadline, so you couldn't file any new bills. You only had to use existing legislation. that was already filed. So they hijacked Senator Gary Stubblefield's bill in order to do Asa Hutchinson's bidding. I mean, that's a classic example of the legislative branch just completely giving up their authority, ganging up on another legislative member's power to serve the executive branch. That is what truly happened in 2015 with your religious freedom. And essentially what happened is the pressure of the LGBT community got to Asa, and he said, I can't stand up to the pressure. And the legislature, for the most part, went along, and eventually they got the revisions passed that Walmart wanted. We've got to take a break. Back in a minute.
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody. If you would like information about advertising or supporting the Paul Harrell Program and Conduit Media Group, call 870-275-9755. Join the fight against big government and advance the preservation of liberty by calling 870-275-9755. The Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
All right, we're going to put that into a separate YouTube video just to have a recap there. I hope I did a good job. You know, it's kind of hard sometimes to go all the way back and find all of this stuff. I mean, we did cover this extensively back in the day, but anyway. Hey, what's interesting is that there seems to be some fallout from this article. Joe, will you throw this article up? I know we've got to go to break here in just a minute. But throw this latest Conduit for Action article up there that talks about, headline, when the governor uses a liberal columnist to publish deceptions. Do you see this right here? If you subscribe, and this has to do with John Brummett actually publishing an article that's, critical, supports the governor, critical of Conduit and everything else. Go over to this Facebook post, too. Click on that for a second, because this is what's interesting. Not that one. Yeah, this one. So there's some people saying that this is not true, that Brummett was writing Asa's talking points, or Asa suggested to Brummett that this is what you need to write. Well, look at what has happened before. Look at this article from John Brummett, if we're going to, flashback it. Do you see this? Can you pull this up real quick, Joe? I know we got 20 seconds. Yeah. John Brummett wrote on February 15, 2016, about a lunch where Asa criticized some of his writings and encouraged him to change his arguments. You can look this up
and we may go through it if we have time. But if it's happened once and it's documented right there, it's probably happening more.
Rush, Glenn, Sean, and Paul. This is Jonesboro's 1013 FM News Talk, KBTM.
Welcome those of you watching at paulharrell.com, Facebook Live, or our YouTube page, The Paul Harrell Program. This is the set where we shoot our Wednesday weekly videos for our Patreon subscribers. And if you want to get on board and get extra Paul Harrell Program content because you want to partner with us, you believe the show has value, you want to help us keep the show on the air, you want to help us grow the show, you want to help us make videos like this one even better, then you need to seriously think about subscribing to Patreon. It's patreon.com/thephp. That's patreon.com/thephp. Get extra content today, partner with us, and help build the Liberty Machine. We're asking you to partner with us for as little as $5 a month. Now, you can go up from there. You can go to $10 a month and get extra features, or $25 a month and become a Conduit Media Insider. But for $5 a month, you can really help us out. You can get extra content. You can see what we talk about on sets like this, and I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching. Back in a moment.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
Before a holy God, being responsible.
Right.
You know, that's something. And then all of a sudden you start to think, well, if everybody is equal under God, then how come there's a royal bloodline that's somehow special, more special than everybody else?
Yeah. You know, go back to the Constitution, what you were talking about, and the connection with one nation under God. What our Constitution really is a collection of sermon topics. When you go through it and look at it, it's a collection of sermon topics that were preached up and down the colonies, that, as you stated earlier, up and down the colonies, that our founders just start putting these things together because our government, you know, in Romans it tells us that governments are ordained by God, God being the higher power. So he delegates to man governments, but those governments are also to be under the auspices of God, and that makes it fair for everyone. That's how Thomas Jefferson came up with what he did. Let's think about this. I can say this is what's true. You can say, no, this is what's true. So there has to be an objective truth. We call that absolute truth. And this is what you get when you're under God. The truth does not have any friends, but it makes a lot of enemies.
Yeah.
Okay? So you can be a truth of the friend, but the truth is not going to try to be your friend. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So that's what we had. Remember that when we were growing up, we heard the term the golden rule. Well, where did that come out of? That came right out of the scripture, when Jesus said, do unto others as you would have them to do unto you. That's an objective truth. It doesn't matter how much money you have, where you live, what color you are. So all these things come when you're under God. So you have to maintain that. That's what makes this nation so great, this ideal. And the aligning of truths, when, you know, people talk about the founders and, you know, owning slaves and so forth and so on like that. But the very words that they wrote, the truth, you know, had to line up with the truth, and eventually the truth caught up with this nation, and we've, you know, that's what I mean. That's what I'm talking about, the Civil War.
Yeah.
So all these things began to unfold because it's part of the truth. And as Jesus said in Matthew 5:6, if you hunger and thirst after righteousness, you shall be filled. In other words, if you are a truth seeker, the truth will eventually come forward. Yeah. And so our founders understood that, and that one nation under God is what makes everything fair and equal for every person. Now, I love what Mark was talking about, the personal freedoms. There's nothing like personal freedom. It's remember the parable that Jesus told about the talents. He gave 1 5, 1 2, and 1 1. And each had an opportunity to do according to their own ability whatever they desired to do with those talents. That's what personal freedom is. If I want to become something special in life, then I have the right when a nation is under God to be that. And if I want to just stand on the side of the road and hold a sign, well, I also have the freedom to do that. You can only get that when you're under God. We're not in a caste system where you have to be what the government tells you want to be.
Yeah,
so this is what's so powerful, one nation under God.
So we're going to be back here in just a moment with Secretary of State Mark Martin and Pastor Iverson Jackson. I have a few more questions. One of them has to do with, and this is just my own personal kind of thing that I've come up with, or thoughts that I've had about the state of the country today and how the younger generation is able to recognize injustice. They just don't know what to do about it. So we're going to be back in just a minute, folks. Don't go anywhere. The Liberty Machine rolls on next. Come back to the program. Joe, I'm just saying I really admire you. I'm having to produce my own show, and it's not easy. So I'm just letting you know, thank you for everything, Joe, our board up. I'm in the command center post because this is where our third mic is. All right, joining us now, we've got Secretary of State Mark Martin, who's back with us. Mark, thank you for being on the show, sir.
Thanks a lot.
And also we have Pastor Iverson Jackson. Now, he's going to be at this event, One Nation Under God. The College Republicans at A-State are hosting him. Also, the Arkansas Family Council Director, Jerry Cox, will be there. So that's going to be fun. Admission is free. It's tonight at 7:30 at Arkansas State University on the third floor of the Student Union. Seating is limited, but come one, come all right now. I want to talk a little bit about Iverson Jackson. He is the senior pastor of Zoe Bible Church in Little Rock. You received your bachelor's in business.
The maintenance of a free society is a very difficult and complicated thing, and it requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind. It requires a willingness to put up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you will spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. We lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
Hey, folks, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Paul. It's hour number 2. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. One of the ways you can help us out, you can call us, text us, or sound off on Facebook Live. 870-275-9799 is the number if you want to call or text. Hey, I would be doing a disservice to our listeners in Northeast Arkansas and all across the rest of the state if I didn't remind you that tonight at 6:30 is a re-election kickoff for State Representative Dan Sullivan, one of the most conservative state representatives in the state of Arkansas, and that is in Jonesboro at the Sage Meadows Clubhouse. And so it starts at 6:30 tonight. If you're a supporter of State Representative Dan Sullivan, you want to see him get reelected, he'd love to see you. I mean, he'd love to have you come out. I mean, the reason I'm telling you this is I'm going to stop by there and say hello. So anyway, that's tonight at 6:30 that he's having that. So best of luck to him. Now, this sound means, wow. All right, so that sound means, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our Conservative Future segment, where we highlight young conservatives to show you that, hey, not everybody who believes in liberty, individual freedom is old. I don't know how else to say it. Welcome to the program. We have Mr. Martin Rawls with us. Martin, thanks so much for being on the program.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Martin, tell us a little bit about yourself. How old are you?
I turned 21 today.
Oh,
today
wow.
is my birthday.
Today is your 21st birthday. Wow.
It is.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So now, are you calling from Phillips County? Do I understand that right?
That's where I'm from. I'm actually on the road right now with 2 other county chairs going to a fundraiser.
Oh, really? Okay. All right. Well, that sounds great. So you're with other county chairs. Are you not affiliated with Phillips County because you're actually a member? You're an officer? Are you an officer of the Phillips County Republican Committee?
I am. I'm the first vice chair of the Phillips County Republican Committee.
All right. So how did you get started in all of this? How did you get started, and how did you become a conservative at only 21 years old?
Well, I didn't really get into politics until, I guess, the presidential primary of 2016, which would have been the first time I was able to vote. And being raised up in church and being involved in church, and I've actually now become a youth leader over the past few years in Phillips County. And I believe that I support all religious policies and the conservative Republicans that run for office. And with that being said, I finally had the chance to vote in the presidential primary of last year, and I knew that the White House could not stand for another Clinton to be in office.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I needed to do something to make that change. And obviously, Phillips County is a huge Democratic area.
Yeah.
I actually just looked up something before I came, so I wouldn't be making something up. But in Phillips County, I wrote this down. The Democrat registered voters in Phillips County is over 8,000. And there's only 1,000 registered Republicans.
Wow.
So with that being said, I was probably one of the only people that had a Trump sign in my yard.
Oh, yeah, I imagine. So, hey, let me ask you this, just on that subject. What are the plans? I mean, with Phillip County being outnumbered, so many more Democrats than Republicans, and that's a rarity. But you guys have got to want to win the argument and get some converts, get some people to say, you know what, this Democrat policy of taking from others under the pretense of taking care of these other people over here, robbing Peter to pay Paul, that sort of thing. It's not working. I mean, you may have good intentions, but it's just not working the way they say it's going to work because, poverty just keeps growing. So what's the plan for the Phillips County Republicans to grow and become a majority in that area?
You're exactly right. The poverty in the area, it's kind of disappointing. And people ask all the time, why do I stay there to help the place when it has no future? But I would disagree with them. I think that we have a chance to fight back, and we've probably up to about 15 to 20 so members right now in our committee, and we're trying to get some people to run this election series coming up in next year because we have not a single Republican official in Phillips County. And that is something we're trying to change to hopefully just turn one or two over, get one or two new candidates to run, and build on it each year and be able to change it to get better for the Phillips County and get our people better off the poverty level
absolutely.
And situation they're in.
We're talking with Martin Rawls. He is interviewing for our Conservative Future segment. He's from the Phillips County Republican Committee. So, Martin, when I say the word conservatism, what does it mean to you?
Well, I would say conservatism means to be pretty much as limited and as small as possible. And when I think about this, I'm going to school to be a teacher right now. I'm almost done, got another year or so, and it makes me think about the educational standpoint, the educational spectrum, where I believe that the government pretty much has got too involved, even with the educational standpoint. It's like for the healthcare, for example, the same thing's happening with education, and statistics in Arkansas are showing that education is failing. I mean, something is going wrong, and all these politicians are trying to fix it, and something is going wrong still. And I just think that that's happening, and they need to sometimes not get their nose so involved in everything, I guess. It's just they're too involved at times.
Yeah.
And we need to be more small and precise.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that. Yeah, small, precise, very cautious, and, what you're describing is, unintended consequences or the road to hell being paved with good intentions, I mean, that's really what we're facing here. I mean, like you mentioned, and it's funny that you said that because yesterday on the program I specifically talked about healthcare and education and how, government feels the need to be involved in both of those things, and they just keep getting worse and worse and worse.
Worse and worse.
Yeah, and yet, and yet to say do less. I mean, you tell some of those Republicans. I'm sorry. I mean, I know, but Democrats and Republicans down in Little Rock, if you tell them that they'd be better off just doing nothing, they don't ever agree. You know, because they got special interests and stuff in their ear saying, no, you've got to pass this. It's going to fix things, and in many cases. Well, let's just put it this way. Whatever new government program that's created to fix a problem, they never fix it because the government program never goes away.
Exactly. And they just keep putting more money to the situation, and it's not getting better.
Exactly.
That's not the solution, obviously.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So what you say you're in school to become a teacher. So what school do you go to, Martin?
I'm actually at Delta State, right across the river in Cleveland.
Okay,
Mississippi.
Cleveland, Mississippi. So tell me, that's funny. I just met some folks from Cleveland, Mississippi on Sunday. That's fascinating. So tell me this: you're 21 years old. You kind of mentioned, hey, you're conservative because that's the way you were raised. We get a lot of that on the program. In college, though, and I don't know much about Delta State, but I mean, is there more room for liberalism, more room for progressive thought over there? Because if I have college students on a lot, and they will tell me, it can be tough sometimes to be a conservative on a college campus today. What's been your experience?
Well, I would say it could be tough. I mean, I know some teachers that pretty much are liberal. You can tell by their actions, but they don't really promote it as much in the classroom. And you're open to your opinions, but they may say something else. It's not as bad as some places are, for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
But your ideas are still open.
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
I took before I ever knew anything about politics or what I was going to do, and I was actually a liberal myself, voted for Democrats in college. I remember a political political science class that I had. And, to this day, and I can't even remember the teacher's name, professor's name, and I don't think he's here anymore. I went to Arkansas State. To this day, I don't know what his persuasions were. I suspect I know what they were, but I don't honestly know. He knew so many. He knew the different arguments for each side, for or against. So whatever I thought about, and I didn't really even know what a Democrat policy was or what a Republican policy was. They would just go issue by issue, and whatever my opinion on the issue was, he'd take the opposite, and that is what a good teacher is supposed to do, because you're challenging people. And that was probably one of the few times, or one of the first times, that I was forced to think critically on these issues.
Yeah, that's how all teachers should be, giving both sides the same credit, same argument, and be able to debate it. I agree. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, Martin Rawls, I appreciate it. So who are some of the? Maybe you don't want to bust them out on radio, but you're riding in with some other county chairmen. Are they young? Are they conservative? Do they want to be on a conservative future segment?
I'm sure. I mean, I know you know Miss Anita Wells from Greene County.
Oh yeah, say hello to Anita. Yes, she's the first district chairman, correct?
Yes, she is.
Yeah,
great at that.
Good. So you have.
And then.
Go ahead.
And then I'm with Phillips County Art Chair, Miss Frances Shell.
All right. Well, give my best to them, and you guys have a safe travels, and also have a happy 21st birthday, Martin Rawls. I appreciate you spending a little bit of it with us here on the Paul Harrell program. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
All righty. Thank you, folks. That concludes.
Have a good one.
Yes, sir. That concludes our most recent Conservative Future segment. And if you know of anybody that wants to be on our Conservative Future segment, I want you to feel free to text the program, call the program, leave us a voicemail, say, hey, I want to be on, I'm a young conservative, or I know somebody that wants to be on, he or she's a young conservative. It's 870-275-9799.
iTex is your first choice for cost-effective IT services. Protecting your business means protecting your data. Are you tired of unpredictable and expensive spikes in IT spending? Using iTex will prevent downtime and loss of employee productivity, and do it all with an affordable, predictable budget. iTex is the premier managed service provider for small and medium businesses. They help their clients put IT to work to earn your business more money, and you should contact them today for a free consultation. 870-336-9778. That's 870-336-9778 or itexusa.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas. Do you need to advertise your business product or service, but not sure what the best choice is? Folks, allow me to introduce you to Talk Radio. You're listening to it right now. Talk radio is one of the most unique mediums in all of advertising because it actually works. It gets the information you want to the people you want to get it to. And by the way, those people are educated, well-informed decision makers of their household, and most of them have disposable income. If this is a target audience for your business, then you have to consider advertising on my show, The Paul Harrell Program. We have options for most any budget and can provide you with exciting opportunities to grow your business. We can put your message across the state, or we can help you locally. Call 870-275-9755 if you have any questions. That's 870-275-9755, or visit my website, paulharrell.com, and click on Advertise.
Broadcasting across Arkansas and holding politicians accountable for what they say and do. The Paul Harrell Program.
All right, we mentioned this at the top or the end of the last hour, but I'm going to kind of dive a little bit more into this because this is fascinating. On Facebook, there is a lot of stuff going on social media. Quite frankly, I think a lot of people trying to compete with potential Republican candidate for governor Jan Morgan and her reach, and just the way people on social media are tired of big government progressivism. I'll tell you much. But there's some people that are trying to, they're trying to, shield the governor from criticism and everything like that. Go to the top of this Facebook post. So this is one that's kind of been around for a while. It had to do with an open letter to somebody, Melissa Kohler, who's a member of a Republican county committee. And this is a Conduit for Action article she links to about Governor Asa Hutchinson has decided to run roughshod over Republican county committees demanding loyalty to him. Scrolling down on this, we see some of the comments. Now, specifically, eventually State Representative Charlene Fite interjects and says, "It is easy to spread mistruths. Some groups seem to enjoy doing it." And people ask, do you find something that's, not accurate about this? And then Charlene Fite says, "I'll be glad to talk to you personally about this." Maybe not publicly. Keep scrolling down, Joe, if you don't mind. And let's see, what else do we have? State Representative Charlene Fite saying, "I found it inaccurate to say that the governor got liberal journalist John Brummett to defend him. The governor does not have control over what this journalist decides to publish." Now, scrolling all the way down, Jan Morgan comes in with the knockout punch here on this argument in this thread, and she links to an older story of John Brummett entitled "Asa and Me, Showdown at High Noon." Look at this. Go to that one. Now, this is fascinating. Governor Asa Hutchinson This is back on February 15th, 2016. John Brummett, liberal journalist, having lunch with Asa Hutchinson. He writes, Governor Asa Hutchinson had me out to the governor's mansion at noon today for a knuckle sandwich. I mean a BLT from Community Bakery. The purpose was for him to lecture me on my recent column assertions that he can't claim, on the one hand, to abhor and want to repeal Obamacare while relying desperately on it with the other hand in order to make his state budget work. Quote, what's amazing to me is that you've aligned yourself with Conduit for Commerce, an extreme right-wing anti-government group pushing Republican primary opponents for private option supporters, Asa began after the small talk. They are going around saying you can't support Arkansas Works, his proposed new name for a conservatized private option form of Medicaid expansion, without embracing Obamacare. And now you're making their case for them by saying the same thing every day. Now, see, you say what you want to about John Brummett. I disagree with John Brummett. But John Brummett was looking at the hypocrisy of a Republican state, or a bunch of Republicans that ran on not embracing Obamacare, but then embracing Obamacare, but then telling the base, hey, we're not embracing Obamacare. John Brummett was at least pointing out the principle of this is wrong. Well, so what happens when he does? He gets called in to Asa's office, or they have lunch, and Asa criticizes him for it. Now, my only assertion is this. The Asa is trying to influence, according to John Brummett, how he writes and what he writes. Now, if you don't think that John Brummett, fast-forwarding to today, 2017, doesn't know the fury on the right in this state and how we've been misrepresented by Asa and the agenda that they are not allowing to move forward, if you don't think he knows that, and you don't think he knows that he's a lot better with progressive Asa, that you really can't tell much difference between him and Mike Beebe, there is some difference, but you can't tell much difference. If you don't think that he is aware that the state has not implemented the policies that the voters wanted them to, you're crazy. And so, yeah, if you go to this article, go to the Conduit article now, Joe, over at Conduit for Action. The headline, when the governor uses a liberal columnist to publish deceptions, scroll down. Let's see. Keep going. So stop there. Brummett's repeated the governor's claim that CFA unfairly labels the governor as a tax raiser because to balance the budget and give military retirees an income tax break, the governor included revenue generation measures to offset the cost of giving the tax break. Please keep scrolling. Governor Hutchinson is a tax and spend big government politician, not because of one bill, but because Governor Hutchinson spent the legislative session supporting multiple tax increases. Now, scroll all the way up again to the beginning, and let's get some of this. Is John Brummett's actual piece. When Governor Asa Hutchinson has to use the liberal columnist John Brummett to vouch for his big government. So in this piece, John Brummett called Asa, quote, plenty Republican enough, plenty conservative enough. Right? In his internet column, Brummett used the governor's talking points to label Conduit for Action a right-wing organization, quote, right-wing organization. Now, first off, right there, if you fast forward back to February of 2016, John Brummett quotes Asa as being critical of Conduit and everything else. And so now here he is. My point is, if they had one meeting, they've probably had several. And I'm just telling you right now, it is not a stretch. There is circumstantial evidence to suggest that, yes, the governor has a direct line to John Brummett, and that John Brummett, a liberal columnist, does go out there and play defense for him. And I understand why John Brummett would play defense for him. First off, he's been very friendly to Asa for the most part. Secondly, John Brummett is a committed leftist. And he does not want the state to go more to the right. He knows that his party, the Democrat Party, is on life support. And the only way, the only way for his policies to continue to be implemented is if Republicans implement them. And that's what John Brummett knows. And so John Brummett is a fan of Asa Hutchinson. I promise you he's a fan. I promise you he wants him reelected. And I definitely know he doesn't want Asa to be primaried by an opponent that has a legitimate chance of winning, like a Jan Morgan, for example. Very interesting stuff. really good that Jan Morgan here found this article, or posted this article, rather, on that Facebook thread. We're going to take a break. When we come back with Senator Scott Flippo, we'll be talking big picture conservatism. And he had a Facebook post that is just incredible a couple of weeks ago. I want to go over it. I want to pick his brain a little bit. Senator Scott Flippo next. Welcome those of you watching at paulharrell.com, Facebook Live, or our YouTube page, The Paul Harrell Program. This is the set where we shoot our Wednesday weekly videos for our Patreon subscribers. And if you want to get on board and get extra Paul Harrell Program content because you want to partner with us, you believe the show has value, you want to help us keep the show on the air, you want to help us grow the show, you want to help us make videos like this one even better, then you need to seriously think about subscribing to Patreon. It's patreon.com/thephp. That's patreon.com/thephp. Get extra content today, partner with us, and help build the Liberty Machine. We're asking you to partner with us for as little as $5 a month. Now, you can go up from there. You can go to $10 a month and get extra features, or $25 a month and become a Conduit Media Insider. But for $5 a month, you can really help us out. You can get extra content. You can see what we talk about on sets like this. And I promise you, you won't be disappointed. Thanks for watching. Back in a moment.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
Business Administration in 1985 from Southern Arkansas University, and a master's degree in public administration from Webster University. And you're also retired as a lieutenant colonel in the military. So certainly thank you for your service. Tell us about how you wound up at Zoe Bible Church.
At Zoe Bible Church?
Yeah, Zoe. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Zoe.
My
What's the Greek word which means life?
Okay.
So it looks like it's pronounced Zoe.
I was the whole ecclesia college scandal. I've been pronouncing ecclesia wrong for a long time, and somebody finally was like, "You're saying it wrong. This means church. You need to know how to say this word." Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Zoe Bible Church is the church that my wife and I founded in 1997, and so that's how we wind up there, because we started the church there. So
good.
We just love what God has called us to do there.
Okay, so today in society, you mentioned a lot of people's problem. Look. You mentioned people, what they say about the founders owning slaves and everything, and kind of using that to basically kind of discount everything that we have here today that might be good. And as I look, across, the scriptures and Bibles, you see God using non-perfect men, broken men.
Those are the only ones in the Bible,
exactly.
except for one.
Except for one, right?
Except for one.
I mean, you look at some of our best guys.
Right.
You look at David. I mean, he's an adulterer, a murderer.
Yep.
I mean, bad stuff.
Can't control his children.
Yeah, exactly. And this is lost on our generation, where they look back in America and they see all that we have today, and they can recognize injustice. They can recognize slavery, okay? Right. They can recognize an injustice like, even if we take all the history books that the liberals write about, Columbus and everything that happened, and they can't reconcile it, though. Right. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I really think this is the problem, is they can recognize injustice. And what they're really seeking is the perfect approval of a holy God, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But they're trying to right the wrongs of history by editing it, getting rid of statues, in an effort to reconcile themselves. Feel free to
you can't. Going back to the founders, again, our school systems have failed our students. For the most part, our public school systems have failed them. Because if you understand history in the context of what we're talking about, the United States of America, when I talk to people and I say, well, how long was slavery in America? A lot of times people say, like, 400 years or 200 or 300 years. I said, no, it's in America, in the United States of America, for only 87 years. Because prior to that, there was no United States of America prior to 17.
Fighting dependency on government so Arkansas can be the land of opportunity once again. Paul Harrell is on now.
Senator Scott Flippo posted a Facebook post on October the 14th where he put forth the following scenario for us to consider. He wrote, "Most, if not all of us, have heard about the free government cell phones, and we generally roll our eyes whenever it comes up in conversation. Well, let's say that your congressman is able to secure a government contract that provides for all the cell phones to be manufactured in your community. This in turn will result in thousands of new jobs with a median yearly salary of $50,000 plus benefits. This will no doubt be a significant boom for your community, state, and their respective economies. Now consider," he writes, "that the only way for this congressman the only way this congressman was able to bring all these well-paying jobs back to their district, i.e. your community, is by way of a little horse trading. You see, this free government cell phone program is one vote shy of passage, so the powers that be approach your congressman and say, if you cast the deciding vote, we will ensure that all phones will be made in your district. This congressman was elected on a conservative platform, and he personally disagrees with this program, as do the majority of his constituents. However, jobs are scarce, and well-paying ones even more so. So, the congressman eventually agrees to cast the tie-breaking vote for this program because he's concluded that by bringing these jobs back to his district, he'll be able to stay in office for as long as he'd like, not because he fundamentally believed in that program itself was any kind of good. The questions," Scott Flippo writes, "I submit to you are, do you think the aforementioned scenario to be good government for all? By all, I mean the entire country. Would you vote your congressman out of office because they voted to create a whole new government entitlement program, the exact opposite of what they said they would do when they ran for office, even though that resulted in your previously unemployed self having a $50,000 plus a year job as a result?" Now, the post went on. Joining us now, we do have the senator from District 17, Senator Scott Flippo, with us. Scott, welcome back to the program.
Paul, thank you very much. I'm beginning to think that my Facebook posts are about like a conversation with me, which is to say they're long-winded.
No, well, hey, if I criticized you, that'd be the pot calling the kettle black, let me tell you. About long-winded. Hey, so seriously, Senator Flippo, what made you want to write this? Because it really does get to the heart of things. You have a lot of things at play here. You have the self-interest of the congressman wanting to stay in office, and he gives way to that. Then you have then you approach the people. If he were to violate his principles, but then the violation of those principles lead you to have a good job, constituent, would you vote him out of office? He just did something really good for you. Talk about that a little bit.
So, the thought that I was having, and this was on a Saturday, right before I was going to an event, and, I was thinking about, all the posts that I see on my Facebook news feed they're kind of emotional grabbers, so I stand for the national anthem. I agree with that. And it upsets me when I see the people that don't. It's all something about, we should be putting pedophiles to death. I agree with that. I don't think we rehabilitate those people. I mean, these are issues that are very emotional, quickly where you are on that issue. You don't have to sit and think about it. And so what I wanted to do was to create a scenario that really, forced people to sit and think and evaluate, where they really were at on any specific issue, and at which point, if any, could you ever see yourself compromising on your beliefs. And so hence the, you oppose a program until you get a $50,000 a year job. Do you still oppose it? And I think that right there is a lot of what's grinding, is a lot of the frustrations that I have within government, and I think a lot of your listeners and the citizens of this state have in government, is it leads us to a stalemate, and it kind of creates this, revolving revolving door and broken record, and it's the same song, just a new person singing it. But we're not getting any, really big change. And so, we always expect our elected officials, and we're not surprised when they do something so they can stay in office. So that's not going to shock anybody. What I really wanted people to look at was to evaluate themselves and look inside themselves and see, could you see yourself doing the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think is not just looking at our elected officials, but we have to look at ourselves and, hold ourselves accountable. And, I say the thing about a belief is your beliefs are apt to change. They can evolve, as former President Obama would say. But your convictions are generally going to stay the same, because it would not matter if 1,000 people lined up to tell you you are wrong. You've seen it in action. You've applied it to your life. You've seen it work, and nobody can convince you otherwise. That's a conviction. And so what I wanted to see is, are your conservative beliefs, are they your beliefs or are they your convictions? And so it obviously created, a lot of different comments, which I really enjoyed. But, government can't, in my opinion, government's not a job creator. And so you create this monstrosity of a program. Yes, it would benefit, it would provide these jobs to your community, to your state. But we're doing that in all the other 49 states. And that house of cards cannot sustain itself. It's going to collapse, and it's going to leave everybody a lot worse off than where they were before. And so sometimes, and Paul, I don't know about you or your listeners, but I'm not a conservative, so it specifically benefits me. So I think I pay a high tax rate, and I pay too much in taxes. But if you took taxes off the table, I'm still a conservative. And a lot of the things that I'm in Little Rock fighting for aren't necessarily things that are going to hit me in my day-to-day life. It's really about the people that are coming after me and making sure that we have some semblance of a republic, of freedom and liberty that they can appreciate, that they can relish in, because that's our gift to the next generation, not a more comfortable lifestyle. That's our responsibility.
Gosh, Senator Scott, I just want you to keep talking, because you are exactly right. I mean, and I know this issue is right in your wheelhouse, because you do think about this stuff a lot. And like, just the whole concept of this Facebook post and how you put it out there, it's unlike anything else that you really hear consistently talked about from the Marble Palace down in Little Rock. And it's so good that you're bringing up these issues, because, and I just want to say, I think we have a lot of the individual temptation to cave. In your scenario, it's now that my politician has violated his principles, clearly so. But the violation of those principles has now secured me a $50,000 job at a cell phone factory. I may not really care to vote him out of office anymore. I think you can see that across the state, just in general, with the power structure. I mean, we may be sometimes so beholden to the Republican Party, and that now that the Republican Party is firmly in power here, right? We've most of the Democrats are gone, right? And so now it's like, well, now we're in power, and now we're making the decisions, and so maybe I'm not going to care as much when the Republican Party platform is kind of, swept under the bed and nothing's really changed because now we're in power. I mean, you can see this same scenario play out in party politics, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely. And, and there's one of the inherent problems of government is that, and regardless of who is wielding the levers of power, be it Republicans or Democrats or even independents, it would not matter, is inherently government at some point is going to put you in a position to vote against your own self-interest. And government knows that a large majority of people are going to vote for their self-interest. I understand that. I mean, that's not politics. That's just human nature. And so, I have to stop and think sometimes that when I look at the reasons of why I'm a conservative and why I identify as a conservative and why I believe in conservative, principles and values, again, to steer back to my earlier comment, it's not just because I want to pay less taxes. It's not just about me. It's about what I believe to be what's best for my community, for this state, and for this country. And, you know, sometimes that there's not going to be an immediate benefit there. And I think that's a lot of society has gotten used where we want immediate results, immediate benefits, immediate gratification. Conservatism is not about immediate gratification or immediate results. It's about a long, sustained process and building a strong foundation, and you got to do it day in and day out. And that's something that I feel like society is kind of losing track of. And I wanted to stem the conversation to kind of bring that back to the roots of, you know, really, why do we believe the things that we believe? And there's a million different rabbit trails that you can go down that will distract you from that. But at some point, you've got to get yourself back on the main road and realize, you know, this is why you're on this road. This is what you believe and why you believe it. Mm-hmm. And this is why you're going to stay on it. So, you know, again, government's always, and it's smart like that, is you get a demographic of people and you figure out what, you know, what's going to, you know, what they're going to love. And so if you've got a poor, economically depressed state and you can bring in thousands of well-paying jobs, well, that's going to make you pretty popular. But now, you know, have we done anything to really advance conservative values? Have we done anything to make, you know, the people that will be inheriting this country, those that are coming after us, the future generations of America, have we done anything to preserve their liberty, their freedom?
Yeah. Well,
or have we just been making decisions predicated on making our own lives easier?
I know this is a specific Arkansas issue, but I mean, I know you've been an ardent opponent of, you know, Medicaid expansion here in Arkansas.
Sure.
I mean, that's kind of the same argument that people made, because you're talking about it. In this case, it was a $2 billion a year program, and this money is all of a sudden going to be infused into Arkansas. They said Arkansas's economy, but really what we're talking about here is established institutions, health hospitals, or insurance companies. And, you know, that your same analogy really applies to that situation.
It absolutely does, Paul. And, you know, interestingly enough, that I wasn't really thinking about Medicaid expansion when I wrote that Facebook post, but it absolutely applies to it. And, you know, part of, you know, my frustrations with the whole Obamacare Medicaid expansion was, you know, I didn't really feel like we were being honest with the people about the reasons of why we were doing it. So I wasn't in the legislature when it passed. However, I was listening to the arguments in the sales pitch, and what I heard was, you know, we have to save rural hospitals. We have a moral obligation to provide free insurance for, you know, able-bodied, working-age poor adults. And these are things that we have to do. And I'm sitting here thinking, so a question I've asked any number of people in Little Rock is said, well, if that cost-sharing split between the state and the federal government went from 10% to 20%, did we still expand Medicaid? No. So then we can take away the argument if we had to save rural hospitals or we had a moral obligation to provide, you know, free health insurance for working poor. We did it because in the short term it was a net positive to the state budget because the feds were picking up 100% of the cost, and we were able to roll tens of thousands of people off our traditional Medicaid rolls and put them on the Medicaid expansion program, and it saved us money. That's why we did it. Now, might hospitals that got Medicare cuts gotten some positive collateral fallout from that? Yes. But that wasn't the reason why we did it. And if that cost-sharing split moved from 10% to 20%, we'd do away with it tomorrow. And look at it. You know, we're already just at 5% of the cost, and we already this year had to, you know, start rolling back 60,000 people off this program. Well, heck, thousands of them weren't even eligible to be on there to begin with. So surprise, surprise, you create this whole new government entitlement program, and people start figuring out a way to scheme it. I don't think that shocks you, and I don't think that shocks any of your listeners.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We're talking with Senator Scott Flippo. Yeah, and so you're essentially saying the community wasn't made better, and their moral high ground argument wasn't about the moral high ground. It was about money. And if you really look at the fiscal part of this, they violated conservative fiscal principles all day long. You know, I mean, this had nothing to do. I mean, because to me, I don't know about you, Scott, but I pay federal taxes and I pay state taxes, and I feel both of them. So to use, you know, my federal dollars to bail out Arkansas's budget, I mean, that's not a legitimate excuse. That's not you know, limited government philosophy in action.
Well, you know, Paul, and I'm going to go down one of those million rabbit trails that I just, you know, that I previously mentioned. And, you know, think about this. And, you know, I've been watching the healthcare debate at the federal level, well, since Obama's been in office, and certainly since President Trump's taken office. And look at the stalemate that even amongst Republicans that we have with what to do with healthcare. And, you know, you hear this repeal and replace. Well, I don't know about you or your listeners again, but I didn't really hear much about repeal and replace until about the last year, maybe. For the first 7 years, it was just straight out repeal. Now, I think what our party, the Republican Party, has to come to grips with is, where do we stand on government involvement in health care? Do we think that, well, government needs to be more involved and needs to have more control, but we're just smarter than our Democratic colleagues, so just trust us, we can create a better system that can better deliver it? Well, I thought the platform was we want to get government out of it. And so, I feel like there's some confusion in our party on exactly how we're going to address it. And you wonder why people get upset or why people feel like the Republican Party has left them. So you run for office and you say you hate Obamacare. And then you get elected to office and you say, well, there's all these political realities that, are just, we can't do away with it. And, Paul, I get those political realities because, listen, if you rolled back Obamacare, that was going to translate into a lot of people that got free insurance are going to lose it. And I don't know how you get around that. However, did you not know that? Did the people running as Republicans against Obamacare not know that when they were running? So they tell people things when they run for office, and they get there, and they do an about-face. And it leaves a very sour taste in people's mouths.
Yeah, it really does. And you're right. Did they not think through? And I think in some cases that's true. They didn't really think through what they were running on, but yet the people elected them. They responded positively to it. And in other cases, I think they just, maybe some people are more nefarious and they just do it to get elected. And, that just comes down to your whole Facebook post as we kind of wrap things up here. Self-interest, are in our human condition. We are really battling. It is an uphill battle. I mean, if you look at your post where the congressman compromises his principles so he stays in office because he's doing something positive for the community, and then you have the people who are not going to vote him out of office now for violating his principles because the violation of their principles enrich them and put more money in their pocket. And that is what we're having to fight. We're having to fight this selfishness is really what it is. It's selfishness, and it's really having less regard for your fellow man. And what's when it really gets tricky, Scott, is when they take the moral high ground and say, no, I'm violating these principles because I have concern for my fellow man. And that kind of comes back to those emotional arguments that you see on Facebook so much. I'll give you the last word.
Well, I agree with what you said, Paul. And, one of the things that I would ask your listeners to do is, when you see people running for office, whether they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, it does not matter. Don't just ask them what they believe. Ask them why they believe it. Because I think you're going to get a lot better picture on, what these stand for and what they're about when you hear them talk about why they believe in what they believe. That will help shape you and show you whether these are a set of beliefs or these are a set of convictions. So it's easy to say that, I support the Second Amendment. Well, let me tell you, if you just did away with hunting and the right to defend yourself, I'd still be the most ardent supporter of the Second Amendment, even if you took those two things off the table.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I don't just. So when I hear people say, "Well, you have the right to defend yourself or to hunt," I agree. But my support of the Second Amendment is not predicated solely on those two issues. So again, not just what you believe, but why you believe it, because it really forces you to internalize and really think about why are you saying what you say? Why do you believe and see certain things? And when you get to Little Rock or when you get to D.C., that's how you're going to have a little bit of a comfort level of knowing this person's going to stand up and toe the line because, again, these are not just their beliefs, these are their convictions.
Yeah.
And I think that's what conservatives want. That's where I think the future of this Republican Party is going to be. It's going to be a conservative future with conservative convictions.
Yeah. Senator Scott Flippo, I appreciate it, sir, from North Central Arkansas State Senate District 17. I appreciate it. It's always great to have you on, sir. Be safe, okay?
Oh, my pleasure.
All right. Yeah, when Senator Flippo, he talks about towing the line of conservatism, not towing the line of the party or, just a lack of conviction, lack of true principles. Speaking of towing the line, we're going to take a break, but before we do, we'll just listen to Toe the Line. Why don't we do that?
The Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
is for all you big government establishment Republicans out there. Hope you're listening. I keep a close watch on these votes of mine. I keep my finger in the wind all the time. I vote big government, and you will pay with your dime. 'Cause every time I toe the line. You know, there's always an excuse not to shrink government. It's much easier just to toe that line. I find it very easy to be rhino blue. I find I'm not alone when failing to come through. Yes, big government, I'm a fool for you. 'Cause every time I toe that line. Legislative sleight of hand would be an accurate description. Or you could just say, they can't quit towing that party line. As sure as night is dark and day is light, I'll vote big government both day and night. And act like I'm shocked when it all comes to light. 'Cause every time I toe the line. You know, the phrase toe the line is the equivalent of toe the mark, both of which mean to conform to a rule or standard. You could also call it the status quo. Tax and spend, I'm always on your side. I love writing government checks that I cannot hide. Buying people's votes always turns the tide. 'Cause every time I toe the line. The Oxford Dictionary Word Histories. The idiom toe the line, from an athletics analogy, originated in the early 19th century. I hope you don't watch these votes of mine. Hope you don't see through the lies and slime. 'Cause I plan on spending with your dime. 'Cause every time I toe the line. You know, toeing the line is what the folks down in Little Rock call progress.
PHP Parody.
All right, folks. Kind of winding down here. 870-275-9799. You can call or you can text at any time throughout the day. I'm not here tomorrow, but we're still having a broadcast as normal. We will have Mr. Josh Waters in studio. And matter of fact, I actually hear, hang on one second, because I just want to make sure that I didn't hear wrong. Yeah, so you guys remember Austin Peterson, right? I am told he's confirmed. Austin Peterson will be calling in the Paul Harrell program tomorrow while Josh Waters is guest hosting. You know, he's now running for Senate of Missouri. And, you know, we have a few stations up north, you know, that are carrying the program that reach into Missouri, and so that's why he was interested. And so Josh Waters will be interviewing Austin Peterson, among other folks, I guess, tomorrow. So still want to be here, still want to watch the program. It's going to be great. Good information from Josh always, and I appreciate him giving me a day off. Also, I want to remind you before I go today that if you're interested in the Patriots of Act 746, they are having an event. If you're in Northeast Arkansas, they're having an event 3 o'clock on Sunday at Tamales in Jonesboro. If you want to connect with some Patriots and know what your gun rights are and get informed and everything like that, that's certainly what you need to do. Sunday Tamales in Jonesboro at 3 o'clock, okay? Let's see, where do we have last? Last but not least. Yes, this, of course. So, tomorrow down at the Marble Palace, I'm told that there's an audit meeting, a joint audit meeting. Is that what it is? So, just it'll be interesting. Let me just say, I'm going to be watching this, what comes down. We'll just be watching what happens in audit tomorrow. Let's just leave it there. And a little bird told me that some very interesting developments could come out of that. Okay, so just so you know, we're watching what goes on down there on your behalf. A lot of what goes on down there is in the shadows and the darkness. We want We want to shine the light on it, though. We want to tell you what's really going on in Little Rock. Not just what they tell you is going on, but what's really going on. Trying to hold people accountable. And last but not least, please, if you haven't considered partnering with us on Patreon, do so. We just sent our newest shipment of Liberty Machine T-shirts out. You can get those on the internet at paulharrell.com. You know, you can buy them, right? But or you could just subscribe to Patreon, become a Conduit Media Insider, and you get extra content plus Liberty Machine T-shirt. It's patreon.com/thephp. That's patreon.com/thephp. If you want to help support the program, grow this message. And if you can't afford it, just help support the program by telling a friend, family member, neighbor, somebody about what you're hearing here, all right? Folks, I'll see you guys on Monday. Josh Waters is in tomorrow. Arkansas, be safe.